The Krell Dominion had swept through the galaxy like a storm that never ended. For 300 years, they had crushed every civilization they encountered. Their warships were massive and their weapons could tear through planets. 19 different species had tried to stop them. 19 species had failed and died. The peaceful Viridians, who could shape life itself, had fallen in weeks. The warrior Draconians, who lived for battle, had lasted only months. The crystalline collective, who existed as pure energy, had been scattered across the void. None of them had found a way to hurt the Krell. Humanity had been watching the Krell advance for 5 years now. The United Earth Navy tracked their movements through deep space sensors and listened as world after world went silent. Human strategists studied every piece of information they could find about how the Krell fought. They looked for weaknesses and found nothing. The Krell had shields that could withstand anything thrown at them. Their engines moved faster than human ships. Their weapons punched through defenses like they were made of paper. Their computers predicted enemy movements before they happened. Every battle the Krell fought followed the same pattern. They arrived with overwhelming force and destroyed everything that stood against them. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the stars. The USS Defiant was a destroyer and one of humanity's newest warships. Daniel was 42 years old with brown hair turning gray at the sides. He had fought pirates and rebels and corporate raiders, but nothing had prepared him for this. The Defiant was positioned at the edge of the Arcturus system as part of the last defensive line between the Krell and Earth. 73 human ships waited alongside, vessels from 3 other alien species, who had joined humanity in this desperate fight. Behind them were Earth and Mars and the colony worlds. 2 billion human lives depended on them holding this line. Lieutenant Commander Amy Carter stood beside Daniel reviewing the tactical displays. She was 34 with blonde hair pulled back tight. Her fingers moved across the screens as she coordinated with other ships in the fleet. She had served with Daniel for 6 years and knew him better than almost anyone. When she looked up, her face was calm, but Daniel could see the tension in her eyes. Long-range sensors are picking up gravitational distortions. The Krell fleet is entering the system. Current count is 247 capital ships plus escorts. Daniel felt his stomach turn cold. The combined human and allied fleet had barely 100 ships. Most of those were smaller vessels that couldn't stand up to a Krell dreadnought in direct combat. They had perhaps 6 capital ships that could fight the enemy on equal terms, and even those were outmatched by Krell technology. All hands to battle stations. Signal the fleet. We hold this line. Commander Vincent Shaw looked up from his tactical station. He was a calm man who never seemed to panic no matter what happened. Captain the Admiral is broadcasting on all channels. The view screen showed Admiral Lisa Peterson aboard the flagship Enterprise. She was 60 years old with gray hair and a face that showed every battle she had fought. All ships, this is Admiral Peterson. You know what we're defending here. We're not just protecting territory or resources. We're defending the right of humanity to exist. The Krell have shown no mercy to anyone they've met. They will offer us none. So we offer them none in return. Make every shot count. Make them pay for every meter of space. For Earth. For humanity. Around Daniel, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. Ensign Paul Martinez at the helm was only 25, but flew the ship like he was born to it. Lieutenant Karen Bishop at communications waited to relay orders. Chief Engineer Gregory Adams worked in engineering to squeeze every bit of power from the reactors. These were good people, and they were about to face an enemy that had never lost a battle in 300 years. The Krell fleet spread into attack formation as it advanced. They made no attempt to hide their approach or use stealth. They had no reason to. 19 species had tried to stop them, and 19 species had failed. The Krell had refined warfare into a perfect science through centuries of conquest. Their formation was flawless with optimal spacing between ships and shields already at maximum power. There were no weaknesses to exploit and no gaps in their defenses. Amy spoke quietly. Captain, even if we somehow win here, intelligence says the Krell have hundreds more fleets in reserve. This is just their forward force. Daniel nodded. He had read the same reports. The Krell Dominion controlled thousands of star systems and had resources beyond anything humanity could match. Even victory here would only buy time. But time was what Earth needed. Time to evacuate colonies. Time to build more ships. Time to find some miracle that didn't exist yet. Distance to enemy fleet. Vincent replied 2 million kilometers in closing. They'll be in weapons range in 7 minutes. 7 minutes until the battle started. 7 minutes until humanity faced its greatest test. Daniel looked around at his crew and saw the fear in their eyes despite their professionalism. They all knew what had happened. To the other species who had stood against the Krell, they all knew the odds of survival were almost zero. Amy, if things go badly, if we're about to be boarded or destroyed, initiate Protocol Omega. She met his eyes and nodded. Protocol Omega would erase all data about Earth's location and defenses. If the Defiant went down, it would take its secrets with it. 5 minutes to weapons range. The bridge fell silent except for console beeps and the hum of the ship's systems. Everyone there knew they were about to become part of history one way or another. The Krell fleet advanced like a wall of darkness blocking out the stars. Humanity's moment had come. The battle began with a simple order from Admiral Peterson. All ships' weapons free. Engage at will. The human fleet opened fire first, trying to gain any advantage possible. Railguns hurled metal slugs at incredible speeds. Missiles streaked through space carrying nuclear warheads. Energy weapons that humanity had reverse-engineered from captured alien technology lanced out in brilliant beams. Everything humanity had developed over centuries of warfare was thrown at the Krell shields. The shields didn't even flicker. No effect. Vincent's voice was tight with frustration. Their shields are holding at 100%. Then the Krell returned fire. The viewscreen erupted with light as energy beams tore through space. A human frigate called the Vigilant took a direct hit. Its shields lasted less than a second before the beam punched through the hull and detonated the reactor. The ship exploded in a flash of white light that briefly lit up the darkness. One ship gone in an instant with 200 crew members. Evasive maneuvers. Daniel kept his voice steady. Random pattern Delta. The Defiant banked hard and the ship's system struggled to compensate for the violent movements. Another Krell beam passed close enough that Daniel could see the hull plating scorching from the heat. Damage report. Amy called out across the bridge. Gregory's voice came through from engineering. Minor hull damage to sections 7 and 8. Shields holding at 87%. That beam just grazed us and we nearly lost half our shield capacity. That was the terrible truth of fighting the Krell. Their weapons were so powerful that even a near miss could cripple a human ship. A direct hit meant instant death. Target the lead dreadnought. Daniel watched the massive enemy ship on his screen. Concentrate all fire on a single point on their shields. Maybe we can create a weak spot. The Defiant's railguns thundered as they fired slug after slug. Energy weapons added their power, pouring everything into the same location. Around them, a dozen other human ships focused their fire on the same target, following the Defiant's lead. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Vincent shouted, "Shield fluctuation. We're getting through." It was only a flicker and only lasted a second, but it was something. The concentrated fire of 13 human warships had managed to stress a single point on the Krell shields. Then the Krell dreadnought simply rotated, presenting a fresh shield facing, and the weak point disappeared. They adapt quickly. Amy's voice was grim. They won't fall for the same trick twice. Across the battlefield, the human fleet was being torn apart. Ships that had protected colonies and fought for humanity's interests were being destroyed like toys. The Dauntless exploded. The Courageous broke in half. The Indomitable vented atmosphere and spun away dead in space. Captain, the Enterprise is taking heavy fire. Karen's hands moved quickly across her console. Admiral Peterson is ordering all ships to fall back to secondary positions. A retreat after only 10 minutes of fighting. Daniel felt cold anger building in his chest. Humanity had survived plagues and wars and near extinction more than once. They had climbed from primitive caves to the stars through sheer determination. They couldn't end here, crushed by an enemy they barely understood. "Helm, take us deeper into the Krell formation." Amy's head snapped around. "Captain, if we can't hurt them from range, we get in close. Close enough that they can't use their heavy weapons without hitting their own ships." Vincent looked up from his console. "That's suicide, sir. So is running. At least this way we go down fighting." Daniel's voice was hard and cold. "Helm, full speed. Take us right down their throat." Paul hesitated for only a moment, then his hands moved. "Aye, Captain. Plotting intercept course." The Defiant surged forward, breaking from the human formation and accelerating directly at the Krell fleet. Alarms blared as enemy targeting systems locked onto the small destroyer. Multiple enemy locks. Vincent's voice was strained. "They're adjusting fire. Captain, we have incoming. All power to forward shields. Redirect from life support if you have to." The ship shuddered as Krell weapons found their mark. The shields flared brilliant blue, absorbing energy that would have vaporized the ship. They held but dropped to 60%, then 40%, then 20%. We're not going to make it. Amy gripped her console as the ship bucked and twisted. Then something unexpected happened. 5 other human ships broke formation and followed the Defiant. The destroyer Relentless, commanded by Captain Kyle Rogers. The frigate Spartacus under Commander Helen Price. 3 other vessels whose captains made the same desperate choice that Daniel had made. If they were going to die, they would die fighting. The 6 human ships plunged into the Krell formation like missiles weaving between the massive dreadnoughts. At point-blank range, they opened fire with everything. Railguns, missiles, energy weapons, even short-range plasma cannons normally used against fighters. And finally, they started to hurt the Krell. A Krell cruiser took a railgun slug through its shields at close range. The projectile punched clean through the hull, venting atmosphere and debris into space. Another ship lost its main engine to a nuclear missile that detonated less than 100 meters away. It's working. Vincent's voice was filled with disbelief. At this range, we're getting through their defenses, but the cost was terrible. The Spartacus took a direct hit and broke in half with all hands lost. The Relentless lost its forward section to a Krell plasma weapon. Of the 6 ships that had followed the Defiant, only 3 remained after 90 seconds of brutal close-quarters combat. Captain, we need to pull out. Amy's voice was urgent. We've made our point. We've shown them we can hurt them. Daniel was about to agree when something on the tactical display caught his attention. The Krell ships were pulling back. They were creating distance between themselves and the remaining human vessels. They were afraid. Not much and not enough to retreat, but enough to reconsider their tactics. For the first time in 300 years, the Krell Dominion had encountered an enemy willing to trade lives for even the smallest chance at victory. An enemy that would charge into certain death if it meant taking one Krell ship down with them. All ships. Admiral Peterson's voice came through the communications. The Krell fleet is withdrawing to regroup. We've bought ourselves time. It wasn't a victory. The human fleet had lost 37 ships and thousands of lives. The Krell had merely pulled back, not retreated. But they had pulled back. That alone was something no other species had achieved. Daniel slumped in his command chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted he felt. Around him, the bridge crew worked to assess damage and help the wounded. Blood stained several consoles where crew members had been injured by exploding panels. The ship's medical officer moved through the bridge, treating burns and cuts. The Defiant had survived, but barely. Captain, we're receiving a transmission. Karen's voice cut through the noise. It's from the Krell. Everyone on the bridge froze. In 300 years of conquest, the Krell had never communicated with their victims before battle. They simply arrived, destroyed everything, and moved on. No warnings. No negotiations. No communication at all. Put it through. Daniel straightened in his chair despite his exhaustion. If this was humanity's first real contact with the Krell, he would face it standing. The view screen flickered, and for the first time, humanity saw their enemy up close. The being looked almost human in basic structure. 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head with 2 eyes. But the similarities ended there. Its skin was deep indigo, almost black, and covered in patterns that seemed to shift and move like living tattoos. Its eyes were solid silver without pupils, and they looked at the camera with an intelligence that was both familiar and completely alien. It wore armor that seemed organic rather than manufactured, with lines of blue energy running through it like veins. When it spoke, the words came through in perfect English translated by technology humanity didn't possess. I am War Leader Jankar of the Krell Dominion. You are human, yes. The latest species to stand in the path of our expansion. Daniel stood and straightened his uniform. I am Captain Daniel Hayes of the United Earth Navy destroyer Defiant. You've attacked our allies and threatened our worlds. By what right do you wage this war? The Krell's expression didn't change. Daniel couldn't even tell if it was capable of expressions humans could understand. Right is determined by strength. We are strong. All others are weak. This is the natural order. 19 civilizations would disagree with you. Amy stepped up beside Daniel. If they were still alive to do so. 19 civilizations were tested and found wanting. The Krell's voice held no emotion. They were soft. They had forgotten the hard truths of existence. When we came, they broke like glass. Their technology was impressive, yes. Their cultures were rich, but they lacked the will to survive. And what makes you think humanity will be any different? Daniel felt his hands clench into fists. You just saw what we're willing to do. We'll throw every ship at you. We'll make you pay in blood for every system you take." "Yes," the Krell said, and for the first time something like interest entered its voice. "Yes, you will. This is why I contact you now. In 300 years, you are only the second species to damage our vessels in open combat. The first was destroyed 2 centuries ago, but they made us work for it. They made us respect them. Respect." Vincent's voice was harsh. "You killed them all and you call that respect. We gave them the honor of a worthy death," the Krell replied. "They did not beg. They did not surrender. They fought until the last of their kind died with weapons in hand. We remember them still. We speak their name in our halls of war. The Varixian people live forever in our memory." The bridge was silent. The idea that the Krell honored their victims was so strange and contradictory that no one knew how to respond. "I offer you a choice, humans." The Krell continued. "You may fight us as you have begun, and you will die as the Varixians died. With honor, yes, but dead nonetheless. Or you may accept integration into the Dominion. Your people would serve the Krell, but they would live. Your culture would persist. You would be lesser, but you would survive." "Slavery." Amy's voice was filled with disgust. "You're offering us slavery. I offer you life. What you do with it is your concern." Daniel looked around his bridge. At Amy, who had served with him for 6 years and knew his thoughts before he spoke them. At Vincent, who stayed calm even when the ship was falling apart around him. At Paul and Karen and Gregory and the rest who had followed him into death without hesitation. "We're not the Varixians," Daniel said finally. "And we're not like any other species you've conquered. You want to know what makes us different? Tell me. We're stubborn. Stupidly, unreasonably stubborn. When the universe says we can't do something, we do it anyway. When we're told to quit, we dig in harder. When the odds are impossible, we laugh and charge forward. You've studied our transmissions. You know our history. We've nearly killed ourselves a dozen times, and every time we've clawed our way back." Daniel took a step closer to the view screen. "So here's our answer to your offer, war leader Jankar. We will fight you. We will make you bleed for every world you take. We'll use tactics you've never seen and weapons you can't predict. We'll fight with a ferocity born from millions of years of evolution on a death world. And when you finally kill the last human when you think you've won, you'll find we've poisoned every victory. We'll have taught every other species in the galaxy how to fight you. We'll have shown them that the Krell can bleed." For a long moment, the Krell simply stared at him. Then impossibly, its mouth curved upward in what might have been a smile. "Good. I had hoped you would choose this path. The galaxy grows boring when all our enemies surrender before the fight truly begins. We will return in one of your weeks. We will bring 5 times the ships you faced today, and we will see if your words match your courage." The transmission ended. Amy let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Captain, you just guaranteed they'll come back with everything they have. I know, we can't win against those odds. I know that too." Vincent looked up from his console. "Then why provoke them? Why not try to buy more time? Because time won't save us." Daniel walked back to his chair. "Even if we had years, we can't match their technology or numbers. But we can make them pay such a terrible price that other species will see there's hope. We can be the example that starts a galaxy-wide resistance." "That's a long shot, Captain," Paul said quietly. "It's the only shot we have." Daniel brought up the tactical display showing the Krell fleet at the edge of the system. "Karen, send a full report of this encounter to Fleet Command. Include everything, especially the offer and our response. People have a right to know what's coming. Amy, start working on new tactics. We need ways to hurt them that don't involve suicide runs. Vincent, catalog every hit we scored. Every weak point and moment of vulnerability. Share it with the surviving ships." Daniel looked out at the stars and the distant Krell fleet regrouping in darkness. 1 week. They had 1 week to prepare for an enemy that would outnumber them 5-1 with technology, centuries beyond humanity's reach. But humanity had faced impossible odds before, and somehow they were still here fighting and surviving and refusing to quit. The week passed in a blur of desperate activity. Admiral Peterson ordered the fleet to fall back to a stronger position near the outer planet of the Arcturus system. It was a gas giant with extensive ring systems that would provide cover and obstacles for the Krell fleet to navigate. It wasn't much of an advantage, but they would take anything they could get. The Defiant spent 3 days in dock at the orbital shipyard receiving hasty repairs and modifications. Gregory Adams proposed a risky upgrade to the energy weapons that would increase their output by 30%. The downside was they would burn out after sustained use, but as Gregory pointed out, if we live long. Enough for that to matter, we'll have already won. Daniel found himself in meeting after meeting with other ship captains. They shared information and coordinated tactics and tried to find any edge they could exploit. Kyle Rogers commanded what was left of the Relentless with his ship barely holding together. Helen Price of the Liberty had served in the border wars alongside Daniel years ago. Commander Jack Murphy commanded the heavy cruiser Constitution, which was the most powerful ship still operational in the fleet. They all knew the truth that no one wanted to say aloud. They were going to lose. The question isn't whether we can win, Admiral Peterson said during one strategy session. It's how much damage we can inflict before we go down. Every Krell ship we destroy is one less ship threatening Earth. Every hour we buy is another hour for evacuation efforts. How many people have gotten off-world? Helen asked. 200 million from Earth, another 50 million from Mars and the colonies. Peterson's face was grim. That leaves 1,750,000,000 who can't be moved in time. They're counting on us. Daniel studied the holographic display of the Arcturus system. We can't fight them head-on. Not with the numbers they're bringing. We need to change the nature of the engagement entirely. What do you have in mind? Jack Murphy was an older man, almost 50, with a shaved head and a scar running down his cheek. We make the battlefield our ally. The ring system around the gas giant is dense with ice particles. Some chunks are as big as houses. The Krell shields are designed for ship-to-ship combat. What if we force them to fight in an environment where their shields are constantly being hit by debris? Vincent, who had joined the meeting, nodded slowly. It would drain their shields constantly, not enough to bring them down, but enough to make our weapons more effective. And the debris would scatter their formations. Amy added. They couldn't maintain the tight groupings they prefer. It's not much, Kyle said, but it's more than we had. I say we try it. Admiral Peterson looked around the table at the assembled officers. All right, we make our stand in the rings. All ships will deploy sensor buoys to track enemy movements and mine the rings with nuclear devices. When the Krell arrive, we'll detonate the mines to create even more debris and chaos. What about their sensors? Helen asked. Won't they just track us through the interference? That's where these come in. Peterson produced a data chip. Our engineers have been working on electronic warfare packages based on Krell sensor frequencies we captured from their probe ships. They're not perfect, but they should create enough false readings to confuse their targeting systems. How much time do we have left? Daniel took the chip and examined it. 42 hours, Peterson replied. Then the Krell will be here. Make them count. The next 42 hours were the longest of Daniel's life. He barely slept, spending his time coordinating with crew members and reviewing tactical plans. He wrote letters he hoped would never be sent. Letters to his parents on Earth, to his sister on Mars, to the families of his crew telling them how bravely their loved ones had served. He found Amy in the observation deck during one of the rare quiet moments. She was staring out at the rings of the gas giant, watching billions of ice particles glittering in the distant sunlight. It's beautiful, she said without looking at him. Strange to think we're going to die somewhere so beautiful. We're not dead yet. Daniel joined her at the viewport. But we will be. In 40 hours and 12 minutes, according to tactical projections. Those projections also said we wouldn't damage a single Krell ship in our first engagement. We proved them wrong then. Amy finally looked at him. Daniel, we both know how this ends. The math is simple. They have more ships, and better technology. Even with our tricks, the outcome is inevitable. Maybe. But the fight isn't. Is that enough for you? Just the fight. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When I was 15, my class took a trip to the Smithsonian on Earth. There was an exhibit on the old space programs back before we had fusion drives. They had a replica of the Apollo command module that took the first humans to the moon. I remember reading about that, Amy said. Do you know what the survival odds were for that mission? At best 50-50. The rocket could have exploded. The lander could have crashed. They could have been stranded with no way home. But they went anyway because the mission was bigger than any one person's survival. Daniel turned to face her. That's what this is. We're probably going to die, but we're buying time for billions of people to live. That's enough for me. Amy smiled sadly. When did you become such an optimist? I'm not an optimist. I'm just too stubborn to quit. The intercom crackled to life. Captain Hayes to the bridge. We have incoming. They ran. When Daniel reached the bridge, Vincent was already bringing the tactical display online. Krell fleet just entered the system, confirming war leader Jankar's promise. 1,235 capital ships plus escorts. Total ship count is over 2,000. 2,000 ships against 93. All hands to battle stations. Daniel's voice was steady despite the ice in his veins. Deploy the electronic warfare packages. Activate the sensor buoys. And someone get me a firing solution on the nearest dreadnought. Captain Admiral Peterson is hailing all ships. Karen reported. The view screen showed Peterson on the bridge of the Enterprise. Behind her, Daniel could see her crew working with grim determination. All ships, this is Admiral Peterson. In a few hours, the Krell will reach our position. They expect us to break and run and die quietly. They're in for a surprise. Today we show them what it means to fight humans. Today we show them that some lines cannot be crossed. Whatever happens, know that you have my respect and gratitude. It has been my honor to serve with you. For Earth. For humanity. The Krell fleet advanced like a wall of darkness blotting out the stars. Daniel looked at his crew one last time. They were ready. Humanity was ready. Let them come. The battle began at 1400 hours Arcturus Standard Time. The Krell fleet entered the ring system in a modified wedge formation with their dreadnoughts at the front absorbing the constant impacts from ice particles. Their shields glowed dull red as they plowed through the debris field exactly as Daniel had hoped. Activate the mines, Admiral Peterson ordered. Across the rings, 100 nuclear devices detonated simultaneously. The explosions weren't meant to destroy Krell ships directly. They were positioned to shatter the larger ice chunks into billions of smaller particles, creating an instantaneous debris storm that would stress the Krell shields even further. The effect was immediate. The lead Krell ship slowed with their shields flaring as they dealt with the onslaught of high-velocity particles. Their tight formation began to spread as ships tried to find clearer paths through the rings. They're breaking formation, Vincent reported with a hint of triumph in his voice. It's working. All ships engage at will, Peterson ordered. The human fleet had positioned itself throughout the rings using the ice chunks as cover and ambush points. Now they struck like a school of predators appearing from behind cover to launch. Volleys of fire before disappearing again. The two. Defiant swept around a house-sized ice chunk and found itself face-to-face with a Krell cruiser. Vincent didn't hesitate. Every weapon on the ship fired at once with the overclocked energy weapons pouring unprecedented power into the Krell shields. The shields held, but they flickered. For just a moment they weakened. In that moment, a railgun slug got through. It struck the cruiser's hull, punching a hole through the armor. The ship didn't explode, but it began venting atmosphere and debris. Hit confirmed, Vincent shouted. We damaged a Krell cruiser. Around the battlefield, similar scenes played out. The heavy cruiser Constitution, positioned near a particularly dense section of the rings, had set up a killing field. 3 Krell ships pursued it into the debris only to find themselves caught in crossfire from hidden human frigates. 1 Krell destroyer lost its engines and went spinning off into the rings. But the price was high. For every Krell ship damaged, 3 human vessels died. The Defiant watched the destroyer Yorktown take a direct hit from a Krell dreadnought. The ship simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that not even debris remained. Captain the Relentless is reporting critical damage. Karen called out. Captain Rogers is requesting permission to ram the nearest Krell ship. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Kyle Rogers, who had followed him into the Krell formation in the first battle, a good officer and a better friend. Tell him permission granted. Godspeed. On the tactical display, the Relentless's icon surged forward, accelerating to maximum speed. It struck a Krell cruiser amidships, and both ships erupted in a fusion fireball that lit up the rings like a small sun. Captain, we have a problem. Amy's voice was tense. The Krell are adapting. They're deploying some kind of point defense system that's clearing the debris around their ships. Daniel pulled up the feed from the nearest sensor buoy. The Krell ships were projecting fields of energy that vaporized incoming ice particles before they could strike the shields. Within minutes, each Krell ship had a bubble of clear space around it. They learned, Vincent said in disbelief. We used this tactic for barely an hour and they've already countered it. The tide of battle shifted. With the debris no longer hampering their shields, the Krell fleet reorganized and began systematically hunting down human ships. The Constitution took concentrated fire from 4 dreadnoughts. Commander Murphy managed to destroy one of them before his ship broke apart. Fleet strength is down to 47 ships, Vincent reported. We've lost half our force, and we've only destroyed or damaged 34 Krell ships, Amy added. At this rate, we'll be wiped out in another hour. Daniel stared at the tactical display, watching icons representing human ships wink out one by one. They had fought brilliantly. They had used tactics the Krell hadn't expected, and damaged ships that 19 other species couldn't scratch. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Captain Admiral Peterson is hailing us directly, Karen said. Priority channel, highest encryption. Put her through. Peterson's face appeared on a smaller screen, visible only to Daniel. She looked exhausted and aged years in the past hour. Behind her, damage control teams fought fires on the Enterprise's bridge. Captain Hayes, I'm initiating Protocol Final Dawn, she said quietly. In 5 minutes, every remaining human ship will execute a coordinated strike on the Krell flagship. We're going to put everything we have into one last push. Protocol Final Dawn was the absolute last resort. Every ship would drop all defensive measures and redirect that power to weapons and engines. They would charge the enemy at maximum speed, firing until their weapons melted or their reactors overloaded. None of them would survive, but they would hurt the Krell. They would make them remember humanity. Understood, Admiral, Daniel said. It's been an honor serving under your command. The honor was mine, Captain. The transmission ended. Daniel turned to his bridge crew. They had all heard Peterson's side of the conversation. They knew what was coming. You all know what Protocol Final Dawn means. If anyone wants to object, now's the time. No one spoke. Vincent shook his head. Amy straightened her uniform. Paul's hands tightened on the helm controls. The rest of the crew simply stood at their stations, ready. Good, Daniel said, and felt proud despite everything. Then let's make this count. Let's show the Krell what humans do when their backs are against the wall. Helm, plot an intercept course for the Krell flagship. Tactical, transfer all power from shields and life support to weapons and engines. Everyone else hold on tight. The Defiant surged forward and across the battlefield. 46 other human ships did the same. They came from every direction, converging on the massive Krell flagship at the center of the enemy formation. The Krell tried to stop them. Energy beams lashed out, destroying ship after ship. The frigate Constellation exploded. The destroyer Ranger broke in half. But for every ship that died, 3 more kept coming. 30 seconds to firing range, Vincent called out. The Defiant shook as Krell weapons found her. With no shields, even grazing hits tore through the hull. Sections 1 through 4 decompressed. The port weapons pod was torn away. But the ship kept going, accelerating and closing the distance. 10 seconds. Daniel gripped his command chair, watching the Krell flagship grow larger on the view screen. It was massive, almost 2 kilometers long and bristling with weapons. But through those shields, he could see the hull beneath. Solid, real, vulnerable. Fire everything. The Defiant's railguns roared. Energy weapons blazed. Every missile in the ship's magazine launched. Around them, 46 other human ships did the same, pouring everything into one concentrated salvo. The Krell flagship's shields lit up like a star going nova. They held for 3 seconds. Then they collapsed. Railgun slugs struck the hull, punching through armor. Energy beams carved molten furrows in the superstructure. Nuclear missiles detonated against the bare hull. And for the first time in 300 years, a Krell flagship took damage. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to wound it and show it was not invincible. Then the return fire came. The Defiant's bridge erupted in sparks and flame. Daniel felt himself thrown from his chair as the ship bucked. He heard Amy scream, saw Paul slump over his console, felt heat wash over him as fire broke out everywhere. He tried to order abandon ship, but his voice wouldn't work. His lungs were full of smoke. The view screen cracked, showing only static and flickering images. But through the static, he saw something. A window on the Krell flagship, and through that window a figure. War leader John Carr, watching as the human ships threw themselves at his fleet in a final desperate attack. Daniel could swear that the Krell warrior raised one hand in salute. Then there was light and heat and nothing. 3 hours later, the Battle of Arcturus was over. The human fleet was gone, 93 ships and 47,000 souls all lost. But they had destroyed 72 Krell vessels and damaged 140 more, including the flagship. Across the galaxy on 1,000 worlds, the story spread. The story of one human warship that charged into certain death rather than surrender. The story of a species that chose defiance over survival. The Krell Dominion had conquered 19 civilizations, but they had been stopped, at least for a moment, by humanity's refusal to break. It would take the Krell 3 months to repair their damaged ships and replace their losses. 3 months during which humanity evacuated another billion people and built new vessels. 3 months to share everything they had learned about fighting the Krell with every species that would listen. When war leader John Carr finally advanced on Earth, he found not a defenseless world but a planet protected by 7 newly commissioned battle stations and defended by a fleet twice the size of the one that had died at Arcturus. Behind Earth, watching and learning, were representatives from 34 other species, who had decided that if humans could make the Krell bleed, perhaps they could too. The war was far from over. It would rage for another decade before an uneasy peace was finally reached. But historians would mark the Battle of Arcturus as the turning point, when the galaxy learned that the Krell could be fought. All because one human warship and the officer who commanded her chose to stand when all wisdom said to run.